we are excited because this morning we are in our second week of our Unraveling series. So for those of you that were with us last week, we talked about unraveling hopelessness. And this morning we are talking about unraveling expectations, which we have found to be a big topic. This morning we are in Luke chapter 1, verses 46 through 55, and then hopping over to 65 and 66. So let me read this for us this morning. It says, "And Mary said, 'My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away with empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors.' Fear came over all their neighbors, and all these things were talked about throughout the entire hill country of Judea. All who heard them pondered them and said, 'What then will this child become?' For indeed, the hand of the Lord was with him." So a lot going on this morning, but I think one of the first things, as we start to think about expectations, I think it's kind of important to put this song in context. So this little section, that first section that we read, 46 through 55, is called Mary's Song, or the Magnificat. And this is sort of after Gabriel kind of pops in and says, like, "Hey girl, you're gonna give birth to God. It's no big deal, act normal." But if you think about what
translation is that?
Yeah.
I don't have that. I don't have that in my NRSV.
That's the carol. I don't know. But I do. I think about Mary here and what that must have felt like, right?
Exactly. And if we get to heaven and the angels talk like that, I'm going to lose my mind.
We don't know what they're into. I don't know.
"Hey, girl, come on in. Gates are open."
Great to see you. We have a headband shop and some earrings right here.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who think the gates are closed. They're not. They're also not pearly, so surprise.
Yeah.
But no, I think that it's so interesting when you think about expectations.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we talk about kind of a lot, actually, around this season is like Mary had expectations for the way her life was going to go.
Sure.
She's engaged, right? She is, getting ready to have a life with Joseph, and then all of a sudden, Gabriel comes in and derails everything that she had planned.
Absolutely. And probably, I don't know what she was thinking, but I would assume that she had seen women in her life and how their lives had played out. And so she thought, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have children, I'm going to live this quiet life. And then all of a sudden, her expectations are kind of in a puddle around her as she has this news. And I find it so interesting because if that had happened to me, I don't know that my first thought would have been to start praising God. I mean, probably, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of a panic attack would have been where I started. But she starts with this song of praise. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's something for us to look at in our own lives. One thing that I recognize is that all of us, or most of us, I don't want to say all, most of us have expectations in so many different forms, right? There's expectations that we have of others, expectations that we have for ourselves, the expectations that other people have of us that we deal with. But as I thought about expectations in this season and in this moment, I thought about specifically the expectations that we have at Christmas time. I think it's a common thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, and the expectations, right, are things that we think are going to happen.
Yes.
Right, so we think they're going to happen, and because we think or we believe that they're going to happen, we sometimes set ourselves up, right, for disappointment.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how many people, grandparents, aunts, uncles, just random strangers off the street who, when they see my children at this time of year, I have 9, a 6, and a 3-year-old, the very first thing they will ask them is, "What do you want for Christmas?"
Yes.
Right? What do you want for Christmas? And it is a inherently materialistic question, because when the grandparents and the aunts and uncles are asking, it's basically like, what can I buy you
Yes.
for Christmas,
Sure.
right? And for the strangers off the street, it's just kind of like a cute question, or it's, I have a child of a similar age, right?
What's
that I have
cool?
no idea what to buy for. What's cool,
Yeah, that's right, sure.
But it's a materialistic question. It's setting an expectation up, right, that Christmas is about a material thing. And I think one of the things that makes the like Charlie Brown Christmas movies so timeless is like we're still dealing with like Christmas is too commercial, right? But also like every character in that movie has expectations the way they think things should be, right? Lucy's like, hey, Charlie Brown, like if you haven't seen the movie, I don't mean to spoil it for you, but you've had like over 50 years, so maybe
Sure.
maybe catch it.
Yeah.
It's real good. But, Lucy says, like, you should direct the show, but then, like, she can't let go of it because there's a certain way she wants it done.
Yeah.
And we run into that all the time, right? You go into, like, your grandmother's house and, like, Christmas is done a certain way, right? There should be a certain way the table is set, or we're going to do things in a certain order, or, like, well, at this side of the family, yes, opens a present on Christmas Eve, but we're, with your dad's family this year, they don't do that. You have to wait till Christmas morning, right?
Sure.
And so there's different expectations.
Yeah, and I think that these expectations are kind of taught to us as children. I thought about how when I was 5 years old, so this is the Christmas of 1988, which for some of you that may as well have been 700 years ago, but it wasn't that long ago. But there was this doll, super hot doll, called My Kid Sister. I don't know if any of y'all remember her, but there was yes, Ashley's nodding her head. There was kid, sister, wherever I go, she wants to go. Now y'all know why I don't lead worship, but this was the thing. And oh good, Ashley put a picture, there she is. That's Kid Sister. Look how cool she.
I would call that knockoff Cabbage Patch.
Yeah, but she was way cooler than that. Bigger than a Cabbage Patch, had long hair that you could braid. And anyway, the only problem with me really wanting Cabbage Patch doll in the Christmas of 1988 was that so did every other little girl. And we lived in a small town at the time, and I'd asked my mom for her, and she went and looked in every store that she could find. I think I even remember her telling me, later as an adult that she went to stores outside of our town just desperate to find her, but couldn't. And so, here I am, little Carol. I'm running to the tree, so excited because I think I'm going to get Kid Sister, and there's a Kid Sister-sized box, and I rip into Kid Sister, and it's not Kid Sister. It's Prayer Doll. I don't know if y'all have ever seen Prayer Doll. It's Kid Sister's highly religious friend. Her little hands Velcro together. Y'all see that? And the other little. I'm just. Look at her. And then the other little treat
she's
is
never missed church on Sunday.
Yeah, she hasn't. There's actually Velcro on her ankles and Velcro on her bottom so that her feet can also go into a kneeling position. Yes.
Accessory-wise, does she come with her own Bible? Is that?
She didn't have her own Bible, but luckily in our house we had 1 million, so it was fine for me and Prayer Doll. But that was kind of the first Christmas, right, that I remember having this expectation, and then all of a sudden it wasn't met. And how do you deal with that, in the mind of a 5-year-old? And I think even then I remember having the decorum to say, oh, thank you. But of course, I was thinking of Kid Sister,
Well, I'm similar thing, probably around the same age. There's this robot that was out that was remote controlled, and you could put like a tray on it. And in the commercials, the kids would like move the robot into the kitchen. Their mom would put like lemonade on it, and then it would come back. The coolest thing in the world, right?
And sit on the couch and get things served.
That's all I wanted for Christmas, right?
Right.
It was a remote control robot that would bring me drinks from my mother.
Sure, it's normal.
Like, as if my mother ever made drinks. Anyways, it's fine. But that's what I wanted. But on Christmas morning, you got the whole, Christmas experience, and the robot I got was a robot called 2XL. And he was an educational robot that you'd put tapes in. Yes, I'm old enough for tapes. Thank you very much. And he would read you stories.
Yeah.
And I also handled it like a pro, very, decorum. Like my parents would say they didn't know anything was wrong. And then my grandmother came into the room, and I ran crying into her arms, telling her that I didn't get anything I wanted for Christmas.
Yeah.
So,
And I think this is interesting, right? Because as I was reflecting on this story and you were thinking about your educational robot when you could have had a delivery robot. Interestingly, though, now you can kind of do that with like those DoorDash robots. You can have one show up
I
on
mean,
your door.
now everybody can use it.
That's
okay?
right. That's right. So it did come to fruition. But I think we do that as adults too, right? We have these expectations, often unsaid, that Christmas Day or even the Christmas season as a whole is going to be happy. Everyone's going to be happy. Everyone's going to be in a good mood. We're going to put all these toys together all night long. And when the kids wake up, they're going to be so excited and so happy. And all of this is going to bring us joy. But not all the time. Sometimes that does happen. Sometimes, things are magical. But sometimes you wake up on Christmas morning and somebody is really sick. Or you wake up on Christmas morning and it wasn't the right thing. And so all of these expectations that we have are just kind of sitting around us, broken.
Well, and I think about, right, tie it back to Mary's story, right? We have expectations, but I think about my parents, right? Like, we make a list of things that we want, right? My children make a list. They don't prioritize the list. I don't know what the most important thing is. In the same way, right, we prioritize things, especially during the season, the way we want things to be.
Yeah.
And yet, right, somebody dies, and you gather for Christmas, but then Christmas isn't the same because they're not there.
Right.
Or, you've gone through a season of grief, and you're trying to show up at Christmas the way that people expect you to, because you've always showed up like that in the past, but you can't because you're just not there. Or your life has changed, right? You've got children for the first time at Christmas, and you're trying to figure out, how do I integrate them into some of the things we're doing? And you realize, maybe our Christmas isn't kid-friendly anymore. We got to kind of figure that out. We all kind of grew in a different way. But I think one of the things that I think about, like that robot experience for me, I'm sure my kids will have that experience at some point, because you just don't know what the thing is, right? I hate to focus on gifts. One of the things I think we realize in our lives is that unsaid expectations end up being premeditated resentments. When we don't tell people what's really important to us, right? When we don't say, I don't care what we do for the rest of the season, all I want to do is go look at Christmas lights. At some point, we got to pile in that car and we got to go look at Christmas lights. Or I don't care what you buy me for Christmas, but I do want everyone to be around the tree, right? If we don't say that out loud, if we don't say those expectations, they become resentments, because then it didn't happen. And, that's the only thing I cared about. Why didn't you do that? People didn't know. In the same way, God has expectations of Mary, right? Gabriel has come and has said, like, you're going to do this incredible thing. Mary has expectations for the way her life is going to go. I don't think Mary ever thought, they're going to know my name 2,000 years from now. They might even write like a cool song like Mary, Did You Know?
Sure, a million cool songs.
But we have these expectations. When we don't say them out loud, they become resentments. We go, man, I really wanted it to go this way. Or, man, it didn't turn out that way. And that's part of the challenge, I think, with expectations, is we have a certain way we think things are going to go, but then we don't always bring people along on the journey.
And so I think it is kind of a two-part thing, right? There's this part in this season where, yes, we voice our expectations, but then sometimes there are times when our expectations are just way beyond what is possible. And I think part of the invitation this morning is, like you're saying, this is kind of a discussion about priorities, is kind of reordering our priorities. I've been reading this really fun book. It's called Tinsel. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. It's by an author, Hank Stuver. He is a writer for the Washington Post. He is based in Washington, D.C., but in the Christmases of 2006, 2007, and 2008, he came to Frisco, Texas. It was a pretty random selection for him to do this. What he did was talk to one of his meteorology friends, and they drew a line of where it is unlikely to snow. And so, obviously we're in that area where it's unlikely to snow on Christmas. And then he just put a push pin in a random spot and ended up in Frisco. And his goal was to study Christmas. Why do we do the things that we do? Who are we? Who are these people? And he ends up making friends with a lady that decorates homes for Christmas and decorates home with just kind of an average single mom that's just trying to find her way, and then makes friends with a couple that have one of those crazy Christmas houses that have a bajillion lights on them. And so he's kind of looking at this thing of what are our priorities in America's Christmas present. Of course, that's been 18 years ago, but it's still a super fascinating read. And one of the things that he said that just kind of cut my soul a little bit in the book, he writes this: Christmas is supposed to exist as a pure moment of bliss and togetherness. We spend more money than we have at Christmas, in part to get close to the simple joy it advertises, because it looms so strong in memory, and because the happiness it represents can be so achingly elusive. Christmas can bring us down like almost nothing else. It is our happiest day and our greatest disappointment all in one, heavily freighted with expectation. So heavily freighted with expectation. And again, I think when our priorities are mixed up about what matters, when putting 10,000 lights on the house becomes the most important thing, I think we're missing it, right? We're missing the whole story. We're missing what Christmas is really about.
Was I supposed to memorize the line of speech? Because you're like, what is Christmas really about? I feel like I'm supposed to mic drop that.
I feel like you kind of went hard on people about having watched the movie, so now was your
I
time
could probably
to prove how
do
well
it.
you know it.
But
yeah.
no, I think you're exactly right. I had a conversation with somebody recently, and they were like, what's the hardest thing about being a minister? What's the hardest thing about being a pastor?
Mm-hmm.
I think they were expecting me to say like writing sermons, right, or preaching them. That's the fun part for me. I don't find that to be very difficult. Or like teaching or counseling or like the administrative details, or weddings or funerals. But I think the hardest thing about being a pastor is knowing how to use your time well, right? It's how do you prioritize your time, knowing when and where to put your weight down, and where you're needed most, or where you can go, and where you can do the most good, and knowing how to prioritize, right? How to put things first. And I think that's probably true of every profession, whether you are a doctor or a lawyer, or administrative assistant or a teacher, an artist, right? You fill in the blank, right? All of us, I think, whatever our profession, the question is the same. How do we prioritize our time and use it well? And I think, take this quote, right, of like, how do we, set our expectations? That's the same thing we're trying to do, and what Christmas does so well is it helps us reprioritize. Because when we stop and think about it, right, the gift that we get at Christmas is the gift of perspective.
Yeah.
And as we try to prioritize different things, Christmas reminds us of our real priorities. It reminds us of the things that really matter. It's love, and it's kindness, and it's compassion, and it's caring for one another, and it's trusting in one another. It's the tenderness in the moments. It's the truth. It's forgiveness. It's reconciliation. It's all of it. And Christmas is a reprioritization of those values. It's a reprioritization of our lives. It resets our expectations.
Yeah, and I think that's just this wonderful moment that we're invited into here. And I think when we think about the story of Jesus coming, the story itself, there's so much that is unexpected in that alone. The Israelites expected this mighty warrior to come and save them, but instead God sent this baby. And the religious leaders of the time expected that the Messiah would come and sort of reinforce their power, but Jesus came and dined with the outcasts. And when the disciples expected that Jesus would end up overthrowing Rome, Jesus hung on a cross instead. And I think that is that when we are prioritizing the right things, it's in the unexpected where there is the really good stuff. So for me, I look back to this whole, silly kind of doll swap thing. And what's funny about Prayer Doll is that I ended up loving Prayer Doll because she was my doll. She was my girl. And I learned about putting my own little 5-year-old hands together and getting in that same posture. And I would prop her up next to me and I would pray with her. That was sort of my first introduction to what it looked like and what it meant to talk to God. And so somehow in that unexpected thing, that little bitty thing, I think there was this seed that was planted that helped point me to the stuff that really matters in this life.
Yeah, when we're talking about unraveling expectations, and we have a representation of unraveling behind us, right?
Yeah.
We have a tree that unravels each week as we unravel, right? Hopefully leading us in the end to what's really important. But so often, right, we think about priorities, and like you got this new priority of learning how to pray and move. There are people who go through life holding on to certain things. I knew this lady who was a collector. But she was an insult collector. And anytime somebody hurt her or said something that bothered her, she would hold that. And just about every story she would tell you was a story of somebody who had insulted her or hurt her feelings or made her in some way feel small. Right? She just held on to it. There are other people that hold grudges. Right? I heard a guy say on the radio the other day that if anybody ever does something wrong to him, they better watch out. Because sooner or later the opportunity is going to come for him to get them back, and he's going to take it, right? He was holding on to grudges. But I think these are really tough philosophies to live by because, right, as Christians, we're not supposed to be insult collectors. We're not supposed to be grudge holders, but rather we're supposed to be love givers. And I think that's beautifully illustrated in the story, right? Mary understands what it is that God is about. It's this upside-down kingdom where we might expect, to lift up the wealthy, the powerful.
Right.
She flips it on his head, lifts up the poor and the lowly. And so she knows. She's got an expectation of who God is, but she's also let go of what she wants in order to do what it is that God wants. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have, is there's so much that we want, especially out of a season like Christmas. We want certain things. We want them to go a certain way. We have certain expectations of how it should be. And when we unravel that, when we let go of that, what we're left behind with is, what does God really want for us in this season? What is God calling us to do in this season? That may be something completely unexpected, like what happened to Mary, like what's going to lead us down a road that we never could have anticipated.
And I think that's kind of the big question, right, is, okay, so how do we unravel our holiday expectations? And how do we recenter on what really matters? And I think we do go back to the Magnificat, right? We go back to Mary's song. I think that we have this opportunity to focus on God's faithfulness like she did. Mary begins by, magnifying the Lord and rejoicing in the salvation that he's given her. And so I think that is our opportunity, one of our many opportunities this holiday season, is to magnify God. Stop magnifying our to-do list. Give ourselves a little break so that we can breathe. Maybe it is more of a time where we reflect on God's blessings instead of grabbing at what else we can, possibly come upon. And then, I think throughout the song, very clearly, she lifts up the marginalized. And I have been looking for that. That's been something that I have been looking for opportunities to do, seeing what other people are doing. And I noticed on Facebook the other day, there is a deacon in our conference, the Reverend Jenny Bates, who is at the Denton Wesley and also Arapahoe. She's been to Grace Avenue to speak before. And she had put a post out on Facebook that said, I want to make cookies this Christmas. If you are not going to be with your family this Christmas and you have a recipe that you grew up with that you really love, bring me the recipe and I'll make the cookies for you. And then at the bottom, she had a little note that said, this especially applies to queer folk that don't have a place to go. And I read that and thought, yes, that is God with us. That is Emmanuel. Doing this simple act, that's how she's choosing to spend her money and her time to make people know that she loves them and feel this comfort. So I think that's a cue, right? That's a cue that we take, lifting up the marginalized. And then I think finally, we just can consider this opportunity to celebrate simplicity. You think about how Jesus was born. Jesus was not born into a house with 300,000 lights and a coordinating music show. Jesus was born in a manger, in this simple place. That's how he came. And I think that we're invited to do that too. It's in the story itself.
Yeah. Well, I do think with all of the stars outside and the heavenly chorus, there were probably at least 3,000 lights and music. But I get the point that you're trying to make, which
Sure.
is there's a simplicity in a baby,
Yeah.
right, in a manger. There's a simplicity in God wrapping himself in flesh
Yeah.
and coming to be among us. And I think the really, when we think about the true meaning of Christmas, right, Linus's mic drop moment is that reminder, right, that unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and we lift up Emmanuel. And when we think about, that no Christmas tree in the manger scene, right, no presents under it, right, the Magi haven't arrived yet. It's really a gathering of God's family. It's a gathering of humanity with God. It's a reminder that at its core, what we were really celebrating at Christmas is the uniting of humanity and divinity and the promise that God gives us to be with us always.
Yeah. So may we have the grace, may we have the mindset, may we have the love and mercy to do that this holiday season.
Amen.
Amen.